In the spring of 1865, the American South was collapsing. Richmond, Virginia, the proud capital of the Confederacy, was in flames. President Jefferson Davis had fled the city with his cabinet, knowing that Union troops were only hours away. In a last desperate move, they carried with them what was left of the Confederate treasury, a fortune in gold, silver, and jewels meant to sustain their dying dream of independence. No one knew exactly how much there was. Some said $500,000 in gold coins. Others whispered over $1 million in bullion, jewelry, and church donations. What everyone agreed on was that it was the last wealth of a broken nation. When the wagons rolled out of Richmond on the night of April 2, 1865, they clattered under armed escort through the dark countryside. The gold had been hastily gathered, coins from banks, plate from wealthy families, even melted church silver. Every mile they traveled was a mile away from Union General Ulysses S. Grant's advancing army. President Davis believed he could regroup in the South, rally what forces remained, and continue the fight. But history had already decided otherwise. The treasury moved south through Danville and Greensboro, escorted by Confederate cavalry. At every stop, small payments were made. Soldiers needed food, blacksmiths demanded silver for shoeing horses, and locals were bribed for secrecy. But as the caravan pushed deeper into Georgia, Davis's army disintegrated. Men deserted, wagons broke down, and the gold began to disappear in small, unrecorded amounts. By early May, when Davis was captured near Irwinville, Georgia, he was no longer traveling with the treasury. He had only a few boxes of coins left, barely a fraction of what had left Richmond. The rest, the majority of the Confederate fortune, was gone. What happened to it remains one of America's greatest historical mysteries. Officially, the Confederate gold was meant to be transferred to banks in Georgia for safekeeping. Unofficially, greed, chaos, and the smell of defeat poisoned everything. Colonel William Preston Johnston, one of Davis's aides, later recalled how money was scattered like autumn leaves as desperate soldiers grabbed what they could. Some claimed that Davis ordered loyal guards to bury the treasure to keep it from Union hands. Others swore that bandits ambushed the wagons and killed the guards in the night. One story places part of the treasure in Washington, Georgia, where Davis's cabinet met for the last time on May 4, 1865. There, the final meeting of the Confederate government dissolved the dream of the South. According to witnesses, a small amount of gold, perhaps $35,000, was divided among the men to help them escape. After that, the trail grows cold. But rumors never die easily, especially when gold is involved. In the decades that followed, whispers of the lost Confederate gold spread through Georgia, Alabama, and beyond. Farmers plowing fields claimed to dig up strange gold coins stamped with Confederate markings. Old men told stories of wagons hidden in pine forests, of shallow graves lined with silver bars, of midnight burials under oaks draped in Spanish moss. Treasure maps began appearing in taverns and pawn shops, most fake, some hauntingly plausible. One of the earliest and most persistent legends centered around Lincoln County, Georgia, where a group of Confederate cavalry under Captain Micaiah Clark was said to have buried several kegs of gold before surrendering. Locals searched for years, but nothing was ever found. Another tale placed the treasure near Danville, Virginia, where a sudden skirmish supposedly forced guards to hide it in a swamp. Treasure hunters still dig there today. Then there were the darker rumors, those that claimed murder and betrayal were behind the disappearance. In 1865, a Union detachment under Colonel Pritchard captured Jefferson Davis and his small escort. Among them were several wagons that had been traveling near the Confederate president, supposedly empty. But soon after the arrest, several of Pritchard's men were found dead, their throats slit. The official reports blamed skirmishes with rebels, but others whispered the soldiers had found gold and killed each other over it. By the early 1900s, the story had become American folklore. Newspapers ran sensational headlines about Davis's lost millions. Dime novel writers turned it into romantic adventure tales, Confederate knights hiding treasure for a future South that would never rise again. But behind the myth lay a strange pattern of facts that kept historians intrigued. In 1874, a railroad worker digging near Abbeville, Georgia, discovered several gold coins from the 1860s buried in a rotted leather pouch. A few years later, in Chester County, South Carolina, a farmer unearthed a small chest of silver cutlery engraved with Southern family crests. Both finds matched the route of Davis's escape. Neither could be traced to any known bank or shipment. During the Great Depression, when men would dig for gold just to feed their families, dozens of supposed Confederate caches were reported across the South. Some claimed to find coins fused together by decades of corrosion. Others only turned up rusty nails and disappointment. Yet the legend grew stronger. And then, in the mid-20th century, it took an unexpected turn north.
In 1970, a diver named Robert Bob St. John began exploring the cold waters of Lake Michigan, near Muskegon. Local rumors claimed that a Confederate ship, fleeing after the war, had secretly carried treasure north to exchange for weapons. It sounded absurd, but when St. John found a sunken steamer from the 1860s with traces of old cargo boxes, newspapers exploded with speculation. Some believed that Confederate gold had been smuggled out of Georgia, up the Mississippi, and across the Great Lakes under false papers. Nothing was proven, but the mystery only deepened. More recently, in 2018, treasure hunters in Michigan's Lower Peninsula claimed to have discovered evidence of Confederate gold buried in a rural field. The FBI became involved, and excavation began under secrecy. When the dig ended, federal agents sealed the site and refused to comment. To this day, the government denies finding anything, but locals insist trucks left the area in the night carrying large, heavy crates. Whether the gold still lies buried in the red clay of Georgia or hidden under northern soil, its symbolic weight has outgrown its material value. The lost Confederate gold represents something larger, the last flicker of a doomed rebellion, the greed and confusion that follow every empire's collapse. Historians now suspect that most of the treasure was probably spent, stolen, or scattered in small sums as the Confederacy crumbled. But the gaps in the record leave room for imagination. Jefferson Davis never spoke publicly about the gold after the war. In his memoirs, he only hinted that he had no knowledge of the final disposition of the funds. That silence became fertile ground for myth. There's also the curious story of Basil Duke, one of General John Hunt Morgan's cavalrymen. Duke later claimed in private letters that a portion of the treasury was hidden in a cave near Savannah, Georgia, to await better days. The letters were found decades later, but the cave, if it exists, has never been located. Over time, the lost Confederate gold has become less about finding coins and more about understanding a nation's ghosts. Every treasure hunter digging in the South chases not just riches, but the memory of a divided America. They walked the same roads where soldiers once marched and where dreams of empire turned to dust. Some dig for history, others for greed, but all are chasing a reflection of a past that refuses to rest. On quiet nights in Georgia, locals still tell stories of strange lights in the pine forests, of old men wandering with metal detectors, of coins found near abandoned rail lines. They say if you listen closely, you can hear the creak of wagon wheels and the distant clatter of chains, the last echo of the Confederate treasury rumbling into the dark. And somewhere, perhaps deep beneath the soil or the water, lies what remains of a nation's lost fortune, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to uncover it. Until then, the lost Confederate gold remains both treasure and curse, a story that binds America's past and present in equal measure, the glitter of ambition, the ruin of pride, and the haunting lure of what was left behind.